My name is Amanda Nerstad, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer at the age of 39 years old. It was a complete shock. I was a busy and active wife and mom to two little girls, and cancer was the furthest thing from my mind. I was used to yoga and running, and it was a complete shock that I had lung cancer. But thanks to biomarker testing, I found out I was ALK positive. We go through our personal journey as a family and a team. And I also am a part of the ALK positive support group and also on the board of directors. We all work together in hopes to find a cure. I was taking a jog. We had just moved from Chicago to Knoxville, and I was completely out of breath. I actually thought I might have walking pneumonia. And I went into a walk-in clinic and asked if they could take a chest x-ray. And she told me that she thought that I had a collapsed lung and to go to the ER immediately. And from the ER and lots of tests and scans and a lung drain, along with a VAT surgery, that's when my surgeon told me that I had stage 4 non-small cell adenocarcinoma lung cancer. It was a complete shock. I was very concerned at how much time I had left. My surgeon told me I had 2 weeks to 9 months to live. We were getting my affairs in order. My oncologist said he wanted to do some biomarker testing and that it was worth it. And it could take 10 to 14 days. It was the longest 10 to 14 days of our lives, but we tried to stay positive with our kids and continue moving forward for a treatment plan. Once I found out I was ALK positive, we tried to find as many resources and information as we could, and that's when we found our ALK positive support group.
I'm Gina Hollenbeck, and I'm the president of ALK-positive Incorporated. We're a patient-driven group, and we really look to find and fund research for ALK-positive cancer. Like you said, our mission is to improve the life expectancy and quality of life of ALK-positive cancer patients worldwide. And I just feel so privileged to be here to be able to talk about how lucky I am to be alive, to be honest with you. And I'm lucky to tell you that I was the daughter of a naval commander, and we moved every 2 years everywhere, and I had to learn to fit in. And as I learned to fit in, I think the way that I did that is really by loving people, like all people, whether they were like me or not. And with that love for people came a desire to help people. So it's not surprising that I became a nurse. And in nursing school, I learned that carcinogens caused cancer. And so I tried to stay away from everything that was a carcinogen. I ate a vegetarian diet. I was a runner. Not only did I not smoke, but I stayed away from secondhand smoke as well. So after 16 years of taking care of people and teaching them how to live a healthy lifestyle, it was a shock to me at 38 years old that I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer with metastasis to my brain. But I'm here to tell you that I'm a lucky girl to be alive because my doctor knew to do biomarker testing. He knew to give me the opportunity to see if I was eligible for targeted therapy. I'm lucky to be alive because I saw the fear and the love in my husband's eyes as I rolled back for brain surgery, and then endured radiation, and then had lung surgery to remove the left upper lobe of my lung, and then progressing on 4 targeted therapies. So I'm lucky to be alive to tell all of you, thank you for what you do because it matters to me. Well, from the very beginning, it was difficult. It was even difficult to get a diagnosis because no one really believed that a 38-year-old half marathon runner could have something wrong with her, like lung cancer. No one thought that that was the case. It was difficult to even get a chest x-ray. And then after I did get a diagnosis, I had to fight to get the medications that I knew that I needed. And the cost of the medications was extraordinary. And so that's one of the reasons that I feel like it's so important for me to advocate for those who can't, because right now I'm feeling really great. And I think it's so important for me to stand up for those who can't. I spent, sometimes 8 hours on the phone a day fighting with insurance companies to make sure that they did give me the proper treatment. And so it was a very difficult road. And so I don't want others to have to endure that. I'd really love for there to be a standard of care that, that's the only thing that's acceptable for people when they get out, diagnosed with ALK-positive cancer. So we found out how much the medication, the targeted therapy that I needed cost, and my insurance thought that it was experimental. I thought that was really funny that they called it experimental. So my friends and family kind of rallied around me and they started a GoFundMe and they raised about $30,000 in like 3 weeks. And that paid for about 1.5 months worth of medication. So it wasn't quite enough to continue going. So we had to play some more games with insurance. And we finally got the medication that I needed approved, but it took several months in order to do that. And I think that's one of the things that really makes me advocate, because I think about the people who don't put or can't put all of that effort into fighting insurance companies.
I was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2005. I was 45 years old at the time. I had been misdiagnosed with adult onset asthma 4 years previously. And for very similar reasons as Amanda and Gina, I was a young, apparently healthy woman. I'd never smoked. I personally had no idea that lung cancer was a possibility, but I received that diagnosis, fortunately was able to have surgery, and that was followed by adjuvant chemo. And actually, I should add, because I think this is important, it was very cutting ground back then, or breaking ground, where my oncologist had me tested for EGFR just right away. And he said it was because I fit the profile as a young non-smoking woman. But I was negative for that. And despite the very aggressive treatment that we initiated, my cancer came back immediately. And this being 2005, there really wasn't a whole lot as far as options. In my case, radiation was not an option because my cancer tends to be very lace-like and diffuse. So we just watched and waited. And then in the summer of 2008, I was restaged to 4, told I had 3 to 5 months left to live. And I did the hard work of getting ready to die and preparing my family as well. He was 7 when I was diagnosed. And so that summer, he would have been 11. And he was unable to even say the word cancer out loud. So this was devastating for him. And we got him counseling. I got counseling. And my first words to the psychiatrist were, "You have to help me learn how to die." I mean, I don't think I had accepted that this was a possibility, because here I was at this point, 48 years old, and I still felt so young. Well, like everyone else here, I found out I was ALK positive. And when I found out, it was a newly identified oncogene in lung cancer. And when I had that restaging biopsy, they had tested, and I came back positive. And when this was explained to me, I honestly didn't know if it was a good or a bad thing, because with EGFR, there was more data out there, but this was brand new. However, there was a clinical trial that had just opened at the hospital where I received my care, and I was given the option of seeing if I could be accepted into this trial. And I knew that if I said no, my death was certain. This had been made very clear. And my hope was that perhaps this trial could extend my life for a few months. So on October 1st of 2008, I became the fourth person in the world with non-small cell lung cancer to take an ALK inhibitor. Wow. So I'm an old ALK mutant. I'm currently enrolled in my 6th phase 1 clinical trial. And come April, it'll be 16 years since I was diagnosed. And actually, I have some good news to share, and that is that my youngest, who was 7 when I was diagnosed, on Friday, he finished his college coursework at MIT, and he's going to graduate. So I never dreamed that I'd have the privilege, this is where we all always get emotional, of being here to see my youngest child graduate. I mean, it's phenomenal, and it's because of research, medical research.
So I'm Colin Barton, and now that I've opened my mouth, you can tell that I'm not American. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and I grew up to be a dentist. I graduated at the age of 22, and I was practicing dentistry starting in 1981. I met a pretty young American lady in the 80s, and she moved to Australia for several years, and then I moved to the US in 95 and continued dentistry in the US. I continued practicing until 2015. I was always extremely healthy, just as Amanda and Gina and Linnea were. I probably shouldn't say this, it's embarrassing, but I literally had not seen a doctor for other than sporting injuries for 30 plus years. I would go to the doctor and get a blood draw done once a year, and it always came back perfect. And other than that, even being a dentist 2 inches from people's faces all day long, didn't catch colds. I was just perfectly healthy. And so I retired in 2015 and thought, here's my future ahead of me. I can stop working day in, day out, every day at work, and go and enjoy life. Well, a few months later, I started having a bit of a chronic cough, which I kind of ignored, and thought it was a leftover cold that I'd caught from some visiting friends. And the cough didn't go away, and my wife nagged me enough that I finally went to the doctor. And the doctor said, it's probably just a leftover cold. Come back in a couple of months if it hasn't gone away. So I went away, and a couple of months later, it hadn't gone away. And my wife said, well, you need to go back to the doctor. And I said, no, I'll just wait. And then I, one day, had extraordinary, incredible, mind-blowing pain come out of nowhere in my lower back. It was like literally 1 second it wasn't there, and the next it was, and it didn't go away. It was there and it wouldn't stop. And so I tried seeing a physiotherapist, and that didn't help. And finally, after a week, I was like, well, okay, I've got the cough, now I've got a sore lower back as well. I'll go see the doctor. So I went back to the doctor, and she said, let's do a chest x-ray. And that was the start of it. And chest x-ray, something showed up. They weren't quite sure what it was. So I got a CT scan, and it was pretty clear on the CT scan there was something there. So then they did a PET scan, and the PET scan showed a secondary tumor in my lower back, which is what was causing the lower back pain. And so there I was on the journey for stage 4 lung cancer. Just like Amanda and Gina, like Linnea, I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I exercised. It just came out of the blue. So that was 2016, and having stage 4 lung cancer was not part of my retirement plan. But I didn't think I had much longer to live. I was kind of going downhill pretty rapidly. I had family and friends from Australia flew out to visit me. I think it was probably the last time they'd see me. And so I had the biopsies done. I was actually squamous, which is very, very unusual for ALK. And I didn't even realize that they had sent off a biopsy to go to biomarker testing. I knew nothing about biomarker testing. And so all I knew was that I was stage 4 lung cancer. My doctor wanted to put me on chemotherapy. I did my research. It seemed like chemotherapy might give you a few extra months, but with the degree of pain I was having, a few extra months held absolutely no appeal whatsoever. I figured, you know, my family was financially secure. My son was growing up and had completed college. And I was like, I don't need to spend 6 extra months in pain and agony. And so I was like, I did some more research and found out that I could start on immunotherapy. And at least that held a hope, not a big hope, but held a hope that it could actually be curative. And I was like, I'll give that a go. And so I started on the immunotherapy, and then it took about 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks, for the biomarker testing to come back. And it showed that I was ALK positive. I don't think my oncologist, well, she hadn't explained what biomarker testing was, and if she had, I probably wouldn't have understood it anyway. And I don't think she thought it was going to come back positive, given I was squamous, and squamous is typically not what you see with ALK. And so anyway, I straight away switched from the immunotherapy to the ALK therapy, and I almost died. So we know now how important it is, A, to get the biomarker testing, but also to get it back quickly so that people don't start on the wrong treatment.
In 2015, the ALK positive support group, which was on Facebook, was supported and started by Marita Carroll. And she was a nurse just like me. And she wanted a place for people from all over the world who were diagnosed with ALK-positive lung cancer to come to be able to discuss the symptoms and the treatment and the side effects of the medications and the targeted therapies. But she really wanted us to be able to stay on focus about just the disease and not about gardening and things that we saw kind of on other support groups. You know, she really wanted us to stay focused on ALK positive. And as the group grew, we saw that there were some people that even had breast tumors that were driven by ALK, and brain tumors and sarcomas. And so those people were invited into the group as well. And then we also saw that there were people who were ROS1 or some other oncogenes, but they took the same drugs that we did. So they were allowed into the group as well. And so we had this amazing platform where people were sharing information about their disease from all over the world. And we were noticing that really not everybody gets the same standard of care. And so that was one of the problems that we saw. And then we also saw that, you know what, we were getting all of these drugs and we were a little bit nervous that industry wasn't going to take us as a priority because we were only this very, very small wedge of non-small cell lung cancer. So we thought that, you know, it may not be important for them to research our drug. So we organized ourselves and we we began fundraising for research. And we were pretty successful as we bound together as patients and fundraising and doing lemonade stands and parties and all kinds of things. And so I'll let Colin tell you a little bit more about the research that we funded and how successful we were in funding some of that. And one of the trials, even, I'll be likely beginning in March. So I'm so thankful for all of us, coming together to be able to fund that research.
Thank you. So it's interesting. I found the ALK-positive support group in 2016. I don't think I found the ALK-positive support group till 2017 actually. And at that stage, there was a member who'd been very involved with advocacy, and she'd been on the Department of Defense review committees, and she was pretty frustrated that she'd see all these proposals crossing the table for lung cancer, and none of them related to ALK. And she was like, well, I've got ALK, and if we're going to get some ALK research, we're just going to have to figure out a way to do it ourselves. And so she came up with the idea to have us join with an advocacy group called Longevity, which is based in the United States. But they worked with us and set up a fund where we could fundraise, and the money would go into their 501c3, which is a American tax-exempt status situation. And so she'd found out that it needed around about $200,000 to get a reasonably good project going. And she invited members with a medical background to be on a review panel to help review any proposals that might get received. And being a dentist, I had a medical background, and I said, sure, I'll be happy to volunteer for that. And it turned out I was selected to be one of the ones that was on the review panel. There were 5 on the review panel. And so that all started towards the end of 2017. The first proposals were received early 2018, and we had no idea whether we would get any proposals. We had no idea whether we would be able to fundraise $200,000. I was in the fortunate position of having worked very hard all my life and having retired, and I was like, I've got the ability to, and I've got the time. I'm going to match everyone's donations. And so I said, I'll match $100,000. You all raise $100,000, and that'll get us $200,000, and we can pick out the best project. Well, before long, we'd reached the $200,000, and by the time we got to actually reviewing proposals, we'd raised almost $400,000. So we're like, oh, good. Well, we can pick out the 2 best projects, not just one. And it turned out that we had 14 applications. As I said, we didn't even know whether we would get any. So we had 14 applications. And when we got through selecting them, which the selection process involved some very medically literate members of our group, doctors and pharmacologists and so on. But also we had leading oncology experts helping us select the projects. So we kind of gave the patient aspect of what we were looking for, and they had the expertise of understanding all the very detailed proposals. And there were 3 very, very strong proposals. And I said, hey, if I put in some extra money, can we fund the 3? And they said, yep. So we kept on fundraising, and we ended up with 3 proposals, and that was in 2018. One of those proposals recently completed, and they put in an application for the next stage because all those 3 were all preclinical translational research projects. And one of those proposals was for a vaccine research, and it was promising enough that we're now actually going to be funding a phase 1 clinical trial for an ALK vaccine. That'll be starting towards the end of this year. And we've got another combination phase 1 clinical trial, also funded from 2020 as well. So we've now raised close to $3 million. We've funded $2.6 million of ALK-specific research. We have awarded projects in 2018, 2019, and 2020, covering immunotherapy for ALK, covering combination therapies for ALK, covering vaccines for ALK, and research is the future, and it's what gives us all hope. There's a trial at MGH that has 3 separate arms, and 2 of them were using drugs that are already approved. There was a 3rd arm that was using a MEK inhibitor that's an experimental drug, and they haven't gotten any funding for that. And so we're funding that 3rd arm, and that's the arm that Gina was just mentioning that she's hopeful to get onto before long. So. Absolutely. So in 2017, just because I've got a curious and inquiring mind, I did an internal survey just within our group and just had a whole bunch of questions that asked, and it was very well participated in. When I joined ALK-positive, we only had about 350 members in the group when I joined in early 2017. I think towards the end of 2017, there were maybe about 600 members, and we had 300 survey responses. So that's pretty incredible, given that most trials only had 100, 120, 150 data points in them. So we kind of decided at that point that we'd like to take it further, and kind of everything got put on hold for a little while, but I started working on it again in 2019, and it's been a big project, but it's going to be a longitudinal, which means that it captures multiple time points, starting with at the time before patients even have any symptoms at all, trying to capture their lifestyle at that point, and then at the time of their initial diagnosis, and then the time that they first carry out a survey, and then it'll be every 6 months after that. And it will be IRB approved, which means that it can be used for being published in journals and so on. And we're hoping to have that released in a month or 2. But we're looking to make the data available to everybody that can use the data. So whether it's for advocacy purposes, whether it's for research purposes, whether it's for oncologists treating patients, we just want the data to be available to as many people as possible and get as many papers published from it as possible to make the information readily available to everybody that needs it. And our goal is to have at least 500 participants and hopefully a whole lot more.
Our ALK Summits started in 2018. The first one was in Louisville, Kentucky, and there were about 35 patients there. And it was just kind of a, hey, let's all get together. We all support each other, and we're all, together. Let's all get together. And I became ALK Summit Chair in 2019, and we had over 200 patients and caregivers, and we also had the best researchers and doctors and the leading industries come and visit. And we had everyone come together for not only support to be there, but we learned, and we had patient panels that Colin ran. And we had research panels that Colin ran, but it was a really great session. And then 2020, we had a virtual event, and I will be ALK Summit Chair 2021, and it will be virtual again. And I think that the important part too is that as a group, we all have our roles, but we all work together, and we're all cheering each other on and supporting each other, but also helping everyone with their side effects or their diagnosis, but also, have you tried this or have you tried that? But we're also, everyone is continuing to fundraise in their own communities, and whatever they're doing, whatever works for them. For our family, we do a lemonade dance party, with our kids. But we all have our roles, but we all work together as well. And one thing that is really great is Colin is everyone's cheerleader. He supports everyone that within our group, and always saying, go research. And he's always there to continue to support everybody. And, and that's how we're moving research forward, from everyone doing their own fundraisers in their own community, and then getting together for ALK Summits. So we can, give everyone a hug and be there, but also learn more.
When I talk to people about my participation in trials, I start by saying that it is both my privilege and my burden. And the reason I say this is I wouldn't be alive without clinical research, and I'm a huge, huge fan, big supporter. But as the person who is actually the participant, I am in sort of a difficult position where I have now spent, I'm 61. So I've spent about a sixth of my life in trials. And that's a long time. It takes a lot out of a person physically. Today, I'm a little bit slow because I had to get up at 5 to be at the hospital for my PKs. So I'm exhausted, but it takes a lot out of a person physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. I just had a situation where I have some side effects from the current drug I'm on that include some issues with my skin. And my team referred me to a dermatologist who prescribed some medication that, wouldn't you know it, insurance didn't cover. So I had to go without the medication for a week, and then finally just decided, no, I'm gonna just pay over the counter for this. But my feeling is that when somebody participates in a trial and you experience known side effects, that the expense for the drug should be picked up by the sponsor. And I feel this for so many reasons, some of which are personal, but also stepping back into my role as advocate or activist. I'm so cognizant of barriers to participation. And again, my privilege, being able to participate, because of the burdens, there are people who don't have the financial resources or the emotional resources of any sort to be in a clinical trial. And not only is that bad from a humanitarian perspective, I think it's poor science, because I feel that you want to get a representative population, and that's not just people with resources. I think the first thing you can do is to talk to people who are actually going through the clinical trial experience, because traditionally that wasn't happening. And I describe it as people talking about us instead of speaking with us. And if you really want to understand what an experience is like, then you speak to the person who's experiencing it. And I sometimes describe my viewpoint of my role as being similar to that of an astronaut, where I'm going places that others haven't been before. And you wouldn't describe an astronaut's experience for them. You know, you would want to have their perspective. And there's such a push right now for medicine in general to be more patient-centric, but certainly clinical trials, because clinical trials are kind of the place it all starts. And honestly, as far as this conversation, I view our ecosystem like a circle. And at the beginning are the researchers, and then everybody else, you know, payers, doctors, support system, they're all somewhere else on the circle, but at the other end is the participant. And what's odd about the way we do things now is that circle never seems to join. Mm-hmm. You know, I have met researchers before touring labs who have never, ever interacted with a clinical trial participant before. And, you know, I just think, how could that be? You know, it's sort of like you've had a baby and somebody's taken your baby away and you don't get to meet the baby. So, yeah, talk to us, interact with us. Well, fortunately, I'm not risk averse. So that part is maybe not as difficult for me as it would be for some, but you still don't want to make a stupid decision. So you do this risk benefit analysis. And I would say that honestly, my experience is that the most difficult part of phase 1 is experiencing side effects that there's no context for. And some of them were quite bizarre, you know, cognitive side effects where my speech slowed and I was having these very vivid dreams where it felt almost like I was tripping, you know, and it's difficult sometimes to be the first person to report this, you know, and this is the part where I feel like the astronaut, where I feel like the explorer. And even today, I'm the 5th person on this trial that I'm on, and I'm trying to explain to my oncologist certain side effects, you know, and this is also where it takes on kind of greater meaning, where you understand that whether or not it's always appreciated, you truly are an integral member of the team, because the people who make the drugs can't take the drugs. So they need someone like me to take them and report back as to what I'm experiencing.
You know, I think that when we look at our group, one of the things that we see over and over again is that where you live sometimes dictates if you live. And so with that being said, you know, I feel like it's my responsibility, because I can, I will, for the people who can't. And so advocating and, you know, continuing to fund research is so integral to kind of who we are. I think none of us are really guaranteed tomorrow. And so, you know, we're all kind of in the same boat. It all kind of ends for all of us. So none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. So for me, I want to make every day count. And so advocating is how I do that.
I think, you know, much like Gina said, I'm in a very fortunate situation and fortunate in many ways. You know, I'm in a situation financially where I'm secure. I'm in a situation where my mind's still functioning okay, despite everything that's going on. I'm retired, so I've got the time. I don't have young children at home that I have to be raising. I'm not working full time. So I'm in a situation where I can And I just, I'm aware of being the lead for our medical committee and the lead for the research review panel and different things like that. I'm able to put in more time than others can. And that's just, it's good fortune. And, I've got to find this balance between leading my life, doing things I enjoy. I'm kind of an outdoors nature person, and I enjoy indoors creativity and chess and things like that. So I want to do the things that I enjoy in life. But at the same time, when you get to the end of your life and you're like, what did I do with my life? Those are things you enjoyed, but I'm not sure that they're really things that give you pride in what you did with your life. And to me, doing what I can with ALK-positive is giving me something that gives me pride when it gets to the end of the day, that, whenever that time might come, I'll be able to say I did what I could.